for a while, and the Fulbright guy got ill, and so I lectured all over India, and then I met a couple of Indian poets, and I started to write poetry when I was bored with the lectures, and the guy said, "Well, you're a poet." I said, no. So he started, actually I published poetry in India, and in Russia too.
Oh my word,
Yeah.
well, you're just well known then. I didn't know you were so
Somebody
famous.
said, I think he's related to Ginsberg, you know, for some reason. How we doing?
Well, good for you.
The living room clock says it's already.
Living room clock is good already.
Thank you, Bob, for that.
Mine says after 2 also.
Hi, I'm Gil Schedler. I've been here for a couple of years, 2.5 years, and so on. I read my poetry here 6 months ago or 8 months ago or something, and I read this poem then, and I'm going to start with that poem now. It's called The Waking, and it's by Theodore Roethke, who I think is the best American poet after the Second World War. He was poet in residence at University of Washington in Seattle for many, many years. When I interviewed at University of the Pacific in 1966, Cliff Hand, some of you may know that name, he was acting president later on, but he was chair of the English department. And in the interview, he said to me, "Who are some of your favorite poets?" And I said, "Well, Theodore Roethke is one." And he said, "Oh, I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. And I feel my fate in what I cannot fear." And then I responded, "I learn by going where I have to go." And he was so amazed that I could pick up a poem and put the third line in. I think he signed my contract right there, and it lasted for 38 years. So the poem's important for me. And this is it. Okay. The Waking. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I feel my fate in what I cannot fear. I learn by going where I have to go. We think by feeling. What is there to know? I hear my being dance from ear to ear. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. Of those so close beside me, which are you? God bless the ground. I shall walk softly there and learn by going where I have to go. Light takes the tree, but who can tell us how? The lowly worm climbs up a winding stair. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. Great nature has another thing to do to you and me. So take the lively air and lovely learn by going where to go. This shaking keeps me steady, I should know. What falls away is always and is near. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I learn by going where I have to go. I sort of think about that every morning when I get out of bed. You know, learn by going where you have to go. At this stage, we don't plan that much, we just go. Okay, now this one, In a Dark Time, my daughter loves this poem. In a dark time. In a dark time, the eye begins to see. I meet my shadow in the deepening shade. I hear my echo in the echoing wood. A lord of nature weeping to a tree. I live between the heron and the wren, beast of the hill and serpents of the den. What's madness but nobility of soul at odds with circumstances? The day's on fire. I know the purity of pure despair. My shadow pinned against a sweating wall, that place among the rocks, is it a cave or winding path? The edge is what I have. A steady storm of correspondences, a night flowing with birds, a ragged moon, and in broad day the midnight come again. A man goes far to find out what he is. Death of the self in a long, tearless night, all natural shapes blazing unnatural light. Dark, dark my light, and darker my desire. My soul, like some heat-maddened summer fly, keeps buzzing at the sill. Which I is I? A fallen man, I climb out of my fear. The mind enters itself, and God the mind, and one is one, free in the tearing wind. Okay, this is a short poem. I love this poem because it's a poem he wrote about one of his students. And I taught at a cluster college of the University of the Pacific, and there was a very close relationship between faculty and students. Anyway, this is an elegy that Rethke wrote for one of his students. An elegy for Jane, my student thrown by a horse. I remember her neck curls limp and damp as tendrils, and her quick look, a sidelong pickerel smile, and how once startled into talk, the light syllables leaped for her, and she balanced in the delight of her thought. A wren happy tail into the wind, her song remembering the twigs and small branches. The shades sang with her, the leaves their whispers turning to kissing, and the mold sang in the bleached valley under the rose. Oh, when she was sad, she cast herself down into such a pure depth, even a father could not find her. Scraping her cheek against straw, stirring the clearest water. My sparrow, you are not here, waiting like a fern, making a spiny shadow. The sides of wet stones cannot console me, nor the moon wound with the last light. If only I could nudge you from this sleep, my maimed darling, my skittery pigeon. Over this damp grave I speak the words of my love. I, with no rights in the matter, neither father nor lover. For Dawn, this is a poem that I wrote after an experience with my son, who was then probably around 4 years old. And wait a minute, get the pages. Oh, father and son, here it is. My young son, not yet 3, heard the whimpers, saw the sad eyes, and sobbed pathetically. Why is Lassie crying? Who will take care of Lassie? Embraced, caressed, comforted, soothed with parental calm and wisdom, my young son returned to the canine drama and again sobbed pathetically. Where is Lassie now? Who will take care of Lassie? Finally, the tale told, the drama complete, yet my young son, eyes red, cheeks still damp, with fragile, stoic voice announced, I'm going into the TV set. I'll bring Lassie home and take care of him. We talked his resolve into mythic tomorrow possibility and turned him bathed and bedward, till periodic, deeper than sad, sobbing hurried his parents to his bedside. Where is Lassie now? Who will take care of Lassie? Late into the night, the crying finally quiet, and now I, father, provider, comforter, eyes red and cheeks damp, wonder of it. That fragile is our everyday world, where canned separation and canine sadness can shatter evening's calm and issue into family prayer. Oh, lassie, please come home. Now, next poem. What is this one about? Extended family. Okay. Yeah, I was a single father with 3 children and 2 daughters who lived with me. One was 12 and one was 4. And I had my hands full, trying to feed a 4-year-old and a 12-year-old and trying to date occasionally. So anyway, an extended family. Crickets and a string quartet in the California evening. I have fed the cats, stroked the cats, washed the dishes, fed the children, tucked them in with books and hugs. My marriage has, as they say, been dissolved. The children are with me this weekend. I am a bachelor. I have this ex-wife and a new love, and the ex's new love. In America, they call that an extended family. Okay. My next book. This one is entitled That Invisible Wall. And when my daughter Sarah, who some of you know, was maybe about 4 years old, we were invited, my wife and I and my daughter, to a reception at a bank that was opening in Stockton. And it was Sunday afternoon, and people were invited, and there was champagne and all that kind of stuff. And my daughter, obviously bored to death, was running all around the rooms. That Invisible Wall, also the title of this. At the art reception held in a modern bank, my daughter ran full speed into a wall of glass, ricocheted 5 feet, and for a second lay stunned, till screams echoed through the lobby. Guests sipping wine turned with a chorus of eyes. I picked my wounded butterfly off the floor, her screams turning to sobs, a red welt rising on her forehead, and together we examined that invisible wall that comes out of nowhere and knocks us flat without any interest. You know, in a new bank, they have their cubbies there, and they haven't put any stickers on the wall, so she's just running full blast into a glass wall. Okay. Okay, January Puddles. Page 8. This poem was written during Super Bowl Sunday. I was invited to the Meredith's house. Some of you may know Larry and Pat Meredith, and they always had a Super Bowl party, and my daughter was with me, and so I said, Sarah, we're going to this party. She, of course, was bored out of her mind. You know, there were like 12 adults there, and she's learning, what is all this about? And so during halftime, I took her out for a walk, and it had rained a lot. And so there was puddles gathered in all the curbs. And you know, earthworms had crawled out onto the sidewalk to get away from the extreme wetness. And Sarah looked at these worms and said, Dad, I got to rescue these worms. So she got a stick and went down the block, taking all the worms with the stick and putting them back in the grass. January Puddles. Earthworms float languidly in January puddles. They're drowning, I say. My daughter begins a rescue operation. She scratches a hole in the dirt. With bent twigs, she lifts them to safety. First 1, then 5. It is endless, hundreds of houses, thousands of city blocks. She looks at me helplessly. I hold my umbrella and shrug my shoulders. We walk on quietly in the rain. This one is written about my other daughter, Rachel, who came to live with me when she was 12 and stayed till she went to college. The title of the poem is My Daughter is Leaving for College. While cats circle the house on well-worn paths, night presses against the window beneath the birch trees. I am alone here. The kitchen smells of baked chicken. I hear saxophones wail the long breath of sadness. In city parks, other children swing the high parabola of glee. The images feel like stone, rough under moss. Some of you have had your children go off to college. Okay, page 23. This poem is something else, I tell you. I once asked my mother, what was I like as a little tyke? What do you remember? She said, well, there's one episode that really stands out. And we lived in Vancouver, Canada. My dad was a minister. He started a mission there, and he and his congregation built the church and built the parsonage right next door. But anyway, she told me that when we sat down to eat, there was 5 children, my parents, everybody had to say a prayer. And she said, you refused to say Abba, Jesus, Amen. You wouldn't say it. So we put you in the bathroom, in your high chair in the bathroom. And she said, you ate all your meals in the bathroom. And I went, how long did that last? She said, 3 or 4 months.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, sanctuary. The only room in the old parsonage he remembers is the bathroom, where he ate dinner and stared at the walls. He was a prisoner of war. He refused to pray. He dumped mashed potatoes in the toilet and watched them go round and round. He would count his fingers and dream about having his very own dog. He wants to run across the farmer's field with his faithful companion, build a fire, roast hot dogs, and never go home again. His dog would be an Irish setter. They would share secrets, how to chase groundhogs, why squirrels can climb trees. At night, he would put his arm around the old setter's neck and stare at the sparks in the fire. Then he would wake up in the bathroom, and his father asks him if he's ready to pray to Jesus. But he doesn't have time to bother with Jesus because he can hunt his own food. And Indians didn't have to pray to Jesus. He knew God wasn't his father. Even his father wasn't his father. He was born in a teepee to a dark-skinned Indian squaw. He didn't have a father, and he wasn't going to thank anybody for mashed potatoes. He was beginning to feel at home in the bathroom. Okay. Memories of Canada. What are we doing here? Evidently, I didn't realize this, but you know, Head Start, Time Out is some. I thought Time Out started with Head Start, but no. In the parsonage, I was often put in Time Out. And it wasn't called that maybe, but whenever they needed to, my parents would put me in timeout in my dad's study. And it wasn't that bad. There was a nice rocking chair in my dad's study, but on wall behind my dad's study, there was a statue of the Royal Mounted Policeman. And I always thought he was looking right at me. What have you done? And when, years later, when my dad died, my mother said, what of your father's do you want to take down? I said, I want that statue of the Royal Mounted Policeman. And it now is in my cottage here at O'Connor Woods. Memories of Canada. In my father's study stood a Royal Mounted Policeman, hands behind his back. He watched me on those long afternoons when I was banished there for kicking my brother or chasing chickens under the barn. Proud, straight as a ramrod, he smiled in spite of my plight. Now, in my later years, I wonder why in God's heaven that was the first memento my mother and I agreed I should inherit in perpetuity. He stands there now in my living room. I've had the sense, however, to hide him behind some plants, so only his glorious red jacket beacons forgiveness and grace as far as the corduroy couch. Okay. This poem, am I going too fast?
No.
Is it okay? This poem, my son asked me to read at his wedding. My son, Christopher. And it's called Heaven Flying Around in Space. A while before that, one of my students gave me a cotton ball that had the world on it, and I love that thing. You know, here's the whole world. There's a cotton ball. You could play with it. And a little aside here. When I was giving a lecture to all the freshmen at UOP one year, I came onto the stage throwing that ball up in the air and catching it and just being silent. And of course the students, 250 of them or whatever, sitting there like this. And so I just was quiet and just kept throwing the ball up in the air. And finally they started to look up. And I said, I don't know if you guys know this, but this week the university passed a rule that you cannot graduate from College of the Pacific unless you've spent a year abroad in a country that doesn't speak English. And then everybody stood up like this, what? You know, and I said, oh, just relax, you know, I'm just, whatever. Okay. Heaven flying around in space. Yesterday, a friend gave me the world, a globe stuffed with rags, not dirt or oil, a world you could hug, dark blue with countries green and yellow, Africa richest in color, and Russia purple up near the top. I want to put that globe on every altar throughout the world, in Hindu shrines, on Muslim prayer rugs, on Buddha's belly. I want one in every crib in America, Russia, Argentina. I want one in every therapist's office, every bank, fast food chain. I want to be a salesman, lawyer, preacher for that cotton globe. 1 foot in diameter, that heaven flying around in space. Oh, earth, I want to sleep with you every night, cradle you into eternity for my children, my children's children. Okay. Okay. Ithaca. This is my last book. Does anybody know what the connotation of Ithaca is? It's where Odysseus in the Odyssey wanted to get back to, and after this was my 5th or 6th book, and I thought this is probably my last book, and I named it Ithaca because it was, I have returned home now. I travel the world and every continent and stuff, and so it's my way of saying I've settled in Stockton, I've settled in Ithaca. Okay, so Now this is Cain and Abel. Isn't it interesting that the first book in the Bible is about fratricide? I mean, the Garden of Eden is a mythic place, but the first recorded story is about a brother killing his brother. And I had that relationship. I had an older brother and a younger brother. But Cain and Abel. I'd roller skate around the block in Louisville, Kentucky, delivering the weekly newspaper, skipping many houses, falling, bruises, cuts, end up throwing most of them down the sewer. Never got caught. Who reads a weekly newspaper anyway? Till my brother ratted on me. The next week, I threw his puppy down the basement steps. Earned me new respect and fear and one hell of a whipping from my dad. So, why am I airing all this stuff? What is this? Oh, this one. This is called In Praise of Indolence. Evidently, when I was a child back in Vancouver, I took to throwing stones at cars. And I was like 4 or 5 years old, and that seemed like an interesting occupation. And I don't know how I heard the story, I don't remember, but I guess my dad told me years later that one time I threw a rock and hit a car, and it screeched to a halt and came back, and my dad said, "Son, we were at that time getting $90 a month in salary, and I had to pay $5 of that to that driver for 5 months. I had to pay $5 to it." But my dad was a sweet man. He didn't, we got over it. In Praise of Indolence. My first act of defiance was to throw a stone at a car. 1940. I was 4 years old. My parents' first clue that there was trouble. Yesterday was my 58th birthday. I still want to throw rocks at cars. But now I just think about it. Don't have to run my ass across Farmer's Field trying to escape irate drivers. Another thing is getting to know your neighbor, you know. My dad was a clergyman, and we lived in the parsonage right next to the church. And my mother was a kind of assistant minister. She played the organ in church, she directed the choir. And on Sunday afternoons, they would go around and visit parishioners who couldn't come to church. And my dad would do a mini sermon and give communion if that was appropriate. And my poor oldest sister, who was about 6 years older than me, was in charge of all us little brats. And it was a terrible, she till her dying day, she says that was a terrible burden she had to bear through her childhood. But anyway, I must have done something wrong because I was again put in timeout, and it was in a little bedroom alcove off my parents' bedroom, and I was confined there in timeout. So evidently, I went into my parents' bedroom, took all my mother's clothes and threw them out the window onto the front lawn right next to the church. And then I evidently had my mattress on my single bed halfway out the window when my parents came back, coming up from the sidewalk, and here I was with the mattress halfway out the window and her clothes all over the lawn. In Praise of Indolence. My first act of defiance was to throw a stone at a car. Did I already read this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I already read this. Okay. Well, yeah, that's just an ancillary story, you know, to put your dirty laundry out there. Okay. My daughter, Sarah, she loved having little science projects, and she had a tadpole. Science project, saving face. My daughter's tadpole died last night. She jumped back as if touching a leper. Maybe it's sleeping, I said. No, she replied, that tadpole's dead. I drained the murky water, the half-chewed lettuce leaf, into the garbage, I asked. She nods and goes to brush her teeth. I see no tears. Down the hall, I hear a little voice. I ain't telling nobody about this. Okay. Okay, that's enough of me. I want to read this poem. We're doing all right time. This is a poem by Sharon Olds, a contemporary poet, lady poet. Some of you may know her. And this is a kind of jarring poem. Sharon Olds is very, very confessional. Her first sex, her first menstruation, and this and that. She's right out there with everything. And this is a poem about her parents. I go back to May 1937. I see them standing at the formal gates of their colleges. I see my father strolling out under the ochre sandstone arch, the red tiles glinting like bent plates of blood behind his head. I see my mother with a few light books at her hip, standing at the pillar made of tiny bricks, with the wrought iron gate still open behind her. Its sword tips black in the May air. They are about to graduate. They are about to get married. They are kids. They are dumb. All they know is they are innocent. They would never hurt anybody. I want to go up to them and say, stop! Don't do it. She's the wrong woman. He's the wrong man. You are going to do things you cannot imagine you would ever do. You are going to do bad things to children. You are going to suffer in ways you never heard of. You are going to want to die. I want to go up to them there in the late May sunlight and say it. Her hungry, pretty blank face turning to me, her pitiful, beautiful, untouched body, his arrogant, handsome, blind face turning to me, his pitiful, beautiful, untouched body. But I don't do it. I want to live. I take them up like the male and female paper dolls and bang them together at the hips like chips of flint, as if to strike sparks from them. I say, do what you're going to do, and I will tell about it. Sharon Olds, I met her and did readings with her. She's quite a lady. Okay, I'm gonna cut this short. I know it's like sitting there. Imagine being a preacher's kid and you had to hear your dad's sermons every Sunday, and I would go to the bathroom, but they had a thing of amplified in the bathroom. I couldn't get away from it. And we were always supposed to keep preacher's kids sit in the second row, you know, and I'm looking up at my dad, and I'd always time him, you know. And he'd always ask me at the lunch table later, well, son, how long did I go? 23 minutes, Dad. Okay, so you can't get under 20, but, okay, why am I saying all this stuff? Oh, sailing to Byzantium. Some of you know that William Butler Yeats, one of the most famous poems of the contemporary. It's a long poem, but it's kind of interesting. Maybe I won't read the whole thing. But William Butler Yeats, Irish poet, early 20th century poet, in his older age, he wrote this poem, Sailing to Byzantium. And Byzantium is a symbol of the eternal. And he's now an old man living in Ireland, and there's so much energy and song and drinking, and he wondered, this is all fading. The body is fading. And he dreams about Byzantium and mosaics in the wall. Mosaics made of stone implanted. They have a kind of eternity. So sailing to Byzantium is his wish for a kind of secular eternity. Okay. I probably won't read this whole poem, but just want to give you a sense of this. That sailing to Byzantium, that is no country for old men. The young in one another's arms, birds in the trees, those dying generations at their song, the salmon falls, the mackerel crowded seas, fish, flesh, or fowl, condemned all summer long. Whatever is begotten, born, dies, caught in the sensual music of neglect, moments of aging intellect. You know, thinking back of our years in our 20s and 30s when there was still a lot of juice flowing. An aged man is but a paltry thing, a tattered coat upon a stick, unless soul clap its hands and sing, and louder sing for every tatter in its mortal dress. Nor is there singing school, but studying monuments of its own magnificence, and therefore I have sailed the seas and come to the holy city of Byzantium. O sages standing in God's holy fire, as in the gold mosaic of a wall, come from the holy fire, burn in a gyre, and be the singing master of my soul. Consume my heart away, sick with desire, and fashion to a dying animal it knows not what it is, and gather me into the artifice of eternity. Once out of nature, I shall never take my bodily form from any natural thing, but such a form as Grecian goldsmiths make, of hammered gold and gold enameling, to keep a drowsy emperor awake, or set upon a golden bough to sing to lords and ladies of Byzantium of what is past, or passing, or to come. Okay. I'm going to just read one more poem. And this poem is page 80. This poem was written by a Roman Catholic monk, Gerard Manley Hopkins, in the late 19th century. And it's one of my favorite poems. It's called God's Grandeur. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. It will flame out like shining from shook foil. It gathers to a greatness like the ooze of oil crushed. Why do men then not wreck his rod? Generations have trod, and all is seared with trade, bleared, smeared with toil, and wears man's smudge and shares man's smell. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel being shod. And for all this, nature is never spent. There lives the dearest freshness deep down things. And though the last lights off the black west went, oh, morning at the brown brink eastward springs, because the Holy Ghost over the bent world broods with warm breast and bright wings. We are so lucky to live at O'Connor Woods because we live in the midst of God's grandeur. And we can see the sun come up, we can see the sun go down. And I love that line, and wears man smudge and shares man's smell. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel being shod, nor can the foot feel being shod. I love walking barefoot, and I think of this poem all the time. And for about 25 years, every winter, I went to Mexico and walked on the beach. And I think I've talked long enough. So, anybody want to recite a poem or ask a question, you're welcome to do so. Okay.
No question? Nothing? Anything? Gil has a few books at the front. They're for sale, and all the money will go to the thank you fund.